Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Well, hello, everybody. Dr. Tom Neal here for another edition of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. It's a bi-weekly program where I explore different facets, aspects of the Catholic faith to show its depth and its breadth and its beauty. And usually I have guests that I bring on to have conversations with so that they can share their wisdom and you don't just have to listen to me talking. But I don't have anyone today, so I thought, well, the only option is for me to speak. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I just did a shoot of this, maybe about 10 minutes into it. I started to fall asleep during my own monologue, which is not a good sign for what's about to come, but we'll see what happens this time. But I got some coffee, so I'm hoping that this will keep me awake even as I speak and hear my own voice. It's my children. One of my children once, many years ago, as we were driving in the car somewhere as a family, and I think one of them asked me, some kind of question. They were in the back seat, and I began to answer them, and it was a long answer. Sometimes I give very long answers to things, as you're not surprised that I'll be talking now for a long time. And my son said, "Dad, your voice is like a verbal massage." It's like, kind of relax. I think he was trying to say it makes you calm and relaxed, but I think really what he was saying was it puts you to sleep. Dad, just so you know, you might want to mix up the cadence and the tone and the pitch or something. I don't know. It's kind of flat. So since then, I've been extremely insecure, and but here I am, using my voice for a living here. Okay, so what would I like to talk about? Well, this is June of 2026, and June is, for many men who are priests, is the month in which they were ordained to the sacred priesthood, the diaconate or the priesthood. But I want to talk about priests, and I want to talk about some priests in my life that have had a great impact on me in one way or another, by their witness, by their mentorship, by their kindness, their friendship, their generosity, whatever aspect of them shaped me and touched me. And I want to honor those men. There's so many of them out there. Those listening, I assume most or all of you are Catholic. And so you, I'm sure, could name also priests that have been influential in your life in one way or another, have touched you and meant something significant to you. And I have certainly quite a list of them. And because I work in the church, I've worked in the church. I've been, let's just say, without getting into the complexities of my background, I've been in the depths of the institutional church since 1989. So yeah, a long time. Whatever that is. I'm not good at math, but it's been a while. And I've gotten to know many, 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 many priests, seminarians, and some bishops, like our present bishop, Bishop Bill Wack, who is just such an extraordinary man to work for, by the way. Those of you who know him at all, in a more public context, would think of him as a very joyful, personable, prayerful, man of the heart, a man of the Word of God, a man of service and boldness and joy, almost like a childlikeness to him. And I can tell you, having now 3 years worked with him up close, very up close and personal, that the man you see up in the sanctuary at Mass or at other events is the man that I've gotten to know very close up here day to day. As a matter of fact, my wife and I, when we first moved here in 2023, we couldn't sell our house in Louisiana when we moved here. So the generosity of Father John Kerr, who's a priest in our diocese here down in Gulf Breeze, he allowed my wife and I for 5 months to live in his rectory, in his basement of his rectory, which is an apartment. and we lived down there for 5 months. Father John Kerr, who's just such a marvelous priest, if you know him, he's a surfer priest too. He loves to surf. And he was an acolyte or altar server at our wedding. So it's kind of neat. Now he's pastor. He was vocation director. He was rector of the Co-Cathedral of St. Thomas More for a while. So we got to know him well, living with him. He was so generous with us. And then the last month he had to ask us to leave because he had seminarians coming to stay at the rectory. So we had to leave, and we still hadn't sold our house, so we couldn't buy a house. So Bishop Bill, one day I was telling him that, and I said, say a prayer. We're trying to find a place just to stay long enough until our house sells. And he's like, well, you need to stay with me. Why would you look anywhere else? That's ridiculous. I have 2 other bedrooms in my house, and that's a waste. Like they should be filled. So please stay with me. You can't ask any questions. It's happening. No pushback. So we did. We lived with him for a month, and I can tell you, the same man that you see in the sanctuary, the man in public is who he is to the core. And even there's just much greater depth than you could imagine behind that. So, but anyway. So he'd be one that I certainly would count as a very important person in my journey, a priest who's a bishop, as well as Father John Kerr. But I'm not going to talk about priests other than that in this diocese, just because I'd have to talk about almost all of them, because almost all of them I have had some kind of relationship with and have been a blessing to me. So, and I don't know, I can't just talk about some of them, even though I just did. Not others. And I'm going to go outside of this diocese, even though I could tell you a ton. So much. From 1987, when my conversion happened in Tallahassee, many, many, many years, I have come to know these priests in this diocese. This is a great diocese with some extraordinary priests. Anyway, so let me share some stories about some priests that have impacted me, as I said, over the years. And I'm going to go back to 1989. When a priest named Father Anthony Manochio, who is a priest of the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey, became my spiritual director. He was really the first official spiritual director I had, someone who I met with regularly to talk about my own life of prayer and striving to grow in virtue and kind of discern what my path in life was going to be. That's what I mean by spiritual director. Kind of great influence on your life if you have one. Before that, I had another one, a spiritual director of sorts, who was a monk, a lay monk. He was awesome. Trappist monk up in Spencer, Massachusetts. But this priest, Father Anthony Manochio, was defining for me in so many ways. He helped me walk through the transition that many young men and women as well, obviously, but young men have to work through from their early 20s to their mid-20s, which is maturing, getting a sense of responsibility for your own life, accountability for your actions and your decisions, learning how to plan and set goals and strive to achieve them and sacrifice and, growing in chastity and self-integration and, so all of that. And then also, just coming to terms with your own family history, which can, for different people means different things. And for me, that coming to terms with my family history was difficult, was painful in particular ways. And he, between 1989 and when he died, on December 31st of 1995, so just before 1985, on the eve of New Year's Eve, the feast of the Mother of God, he died. So for those years, he was a powerful presence in my life and journey, decisive. He was ordained in the early 1960s. He served as a chaplain in the Vietnam War. He is an amazing story. He shared with me one time that in his early priesthood, I think not long after his ordination, but I can't remember exactly when it happened, but he developed vocal cord paralysis from I don't know if I think he had an illness or infection or fever or something, and he developed that, and he couldn't speak. He could whisper, couldn't speak, which is really problematic for being a priest. And it was on the feast of St. Blaise, Bishop and Martyr, which is February the 3rd, that he received the blessing of the candles on his throat. And at that moment, his vocal cords began to work again, and he gained his voice back, almost like a Zechariah kind of going from mute to being able to speak again. And so he had a great devotion, needless to say, to St. Blaise for that reason. He had, a lot of stories that came out of Vietnam, a lot of difficult things from those years, but served as a chaplain honorably. And when he was ordained to the priesthood, he traveled to Europe and made 5 stops to make 5 consecrations of his new priesthood, his freshly begun priestly ministry. He went first to Rome, to the tomb of Peter, and consecrated his priesthood to fidelity to the church, the universal church, and to the successor of St. Peter, the Pope. So that was his first consecration. I'm going to get my glasses out here. Sorry. Secondly, he went to Assisi outside of Rome, and he consecrated his priesthood in front of the tomb of Francis to poverty, so that he would live in his priesthood a simple life. He pledged himself to that, and I'll get to that in a moment, him living that out. Then he went to Lourdes in France, and he consecrated his priesthood to Our Lady, to the Mother of God, to the Mother of Jesus, the mother of all priests, and to the work of a healing ministry. He wanted his ministry, his priestly ministry, to be healing for people, body, mind, and spirit. And so he consecrated his priesthood to her intercession and to the miraculous spring there is kind of a way that he could participate in that work. And boy, did he ever do that. Then he went to Ars in France, where the curé of Ars, or St. John Vianney, was a priest for many decades, who was, among many things, he was a remarkable, extraordinary kind of fireworks kind of saint in this tiny little town of Ars. And he was known as the priest, especially of the confessional. He would spend hours and hours and hours each day in the confessional, hearing people's confessions who would travel from all over Europe and beyond just to come to go to confession to him, partly because he had these extraordinary charismatic gifts, like the ability to read souls and so on. So anyway, so he consecrated his priesthood to the confessional, to be a faithful confessor for people. And then lastly, he went to Lisieux, where Saint Therese, the little flower, was from, her convent where she lived and died. And he consecrated his priesthood to her little way, so that he would follow the way of humility, of littleness, of not being about himself, but being about the Lord and being about the people that he served. And that was those things in many ways could be the 5 chapters of his biography, those different aspects of his life and his ministry and his character. He died, as I said, on the Feast of Our Lady, and he had prayed during his life to die on a Feast of Our Lady, and he died on December 31st, 1995. He was supposed to celebrate the Vigil Mass, the 7 o'clock Vigil Mass, and it was after 7, and he didn't show up, so someone went over to the rectory to check on him, and they found him sitting in a rocking chair in front of a TV that was on EWTN, and he had a rosary in his lap that he was praying before Mass, and he had just died of heart failure. He had a heart attack in his rocking chair and just was slumped over. And he died of heart failure partly because before Christmas, his doctor had told him that he needed to have heart surgery immediately. And he said, after Christmas, he says, I need to be with my people in my parish. He was in Jersey City, New Jersey at Holy Rosary Parish in Jersey City. And he said, I have to be with my people. So after Christmas, I'll have my surgery. So he had scheduled to have his surgery in mid-January, but he never survived to that point. I said he went to Assisi to consecrate his priesthood to poverty. He was a man of great simplicity. Very, very simple life. One of the things that stood out about him among many, he was very generous. He was always giving things away so he would be given things by people as gifts, and he would find ways to give them away. If people would give him a gift certificate to a restaurant, he would find a young couple in his parish, and he would give them the gift certificate to the restaurant, and then he would give them some money for childcare for their children if they needed babysitting. His car, he told me that the cars he would always buy a car. He would look at his parish, his parishioners, and he would look at what the poorest parishioner in his parish who had a car, that's the level of car that he wanted to have. That's the kind of car he wanted to have that was no better than the car of the poorest person in the parish who had a car. And so he would always get these, as my son would call them, beaters, these beat up cars, and drive them. And I always thought that was a remarkable thing. He also prayed. He was a man of the Holy Hour, so every day he did a Holy Hour in front of the tabernacle, the Eucharist, and he would do that before his day began. So he'd get up at like 4 something, let's just say 4:30 in the morning. He'd do his Holy Hour from 4:30 to 5:30 in his chapel, in his rectory where the Eucharist was reserved. Do his Holy Hour there, do his prayers, his breviary, his rosary, and then he would have right next to his chair a copy of the parish directory. And he would each day go through a page or two of the directory and pray for those people on those pages that were his parishioners. He said that was part of his prayer, was that book, because that's what he said. That's why he's a priest. He's a priest who, he loved quoting John Vianney, who said a priest is above all a man of prayer. He used to be known for that, and he used to always say that to me. A priest. The signature of a priest should always be that people know that he prays, not because he wants to show off, but because they see that it's just so natural to him. So you'd always see him before Mass praying. After Mass is over, he would always kneel down for a moment in front of the tabernacle before he would take his vestments off and go to leave or whatever. He was a man wasn't a monk, but there's so many other stories. The archbishop of his diocese at the time, he would tell the archbishop that if you have any priests that are burned out or need a break or are in a bad place, just not doing well, he said to send them to me and let them live with me for a while, and I'll nurse them back. And he would. So he'd take in priests that were in a difficult place, and they would live with him. And I remember he would make breakfast in the morning for when I would stay with him. The weekends I would go visit. He would make breakfast for me and for the priests who was there. There's always a priest there besides his parochial vicar. He loved the priesthood. He loved his brother priests. He loved the church. He loved Our Lady. He loved the Holy Mass. He loved his people. He was known as the street padre because after morning Mass and breakfast, and then probably go into the office, and then he would take a walk through the streets of his city parish territory. And he'd pray the rosary while he walked, and he would visit people all through the area, go to their apartments, their homes, businesses. He'd go in, he'd say hello to people. He'd invite people back to church if he hadn't seen them. And he'd always has a great sense of humor that he could get away with it. And they'd say, yeah, Father, I know. I got to go back to confession. He'd go, well, right, let's do it right now. I'm right here. I'm here for you. And then I'd walk away. And he put his stole on and he'd hear their confession. It was wonderful. And there's lots of stories, oh my goodness, of so many people that he touched on these walks. And then he got to know their situations, people who had situations of poverty, domestic abuse, drug addiction, so many things that he was always attentive to, helping people, getting them assistance, reaching out to them, inviting them back to the church, and so on. He was deeply, deeply revered. He also, the homeless, he had a real heart for the homeless. There are a lot of homeless in the city of Jersey City, like with all cities. And there was a rotating system of the churches and synagogues and maybe mosques in the area of having the homeless stay at that church in their gym or whatever facility they had for sleeping that night during the winter. And I remember one time when I was there and it was turn for his parish to have dinner for the homeless there and then a place for them to sleep overnight, that he invited me to join him in sleeping on a mat in the, I don't know what it was, a parish hall or what it was, sleep on a mat in there with all the other homeless who were on the mats in this, space, whatever that was. And I just thought that is extraordinary, and it was no fanfare. It was just part of what he did. It's who he was. A couple other things, then I'll move on to another priest. He one time he said to me, we were talking spiritual direction, and he was talking about, one day if you go around and you have success giving talks, because I was beginning to get a sense that was a calling for me, which I'd never considered my whole life, to speak and teach. And he said, if this is true, if this is really what the Lord is calling you to, then, and if you become successful doing that one day, I want you to remember two things. First of all, if people praise you and compliment you and say, what a great job you do, I want you to think of me and say, they don't know me like Father Tony knows me. Father Tony really knows me. He goes, I know you. And the you that I know is the real you. So don't let the facade of what they think you are be confused with what you really are. Remember who you are. It would say that, we'd laugh, but it was very true to remember. Keep yourself grounded in reality. And he was very good at that. Let me tell you, spiritual direction with him was a study in reality. And then the other thing he would say is this. He'd say, if they compliment you, I want you to say this inside of you. I want you to say, oh, how much God must love them to give me these gifts. How much God must love them to give me these gifts. I thought I've always found that a profound statement, because it makes me realize and remember that everything that I have, every gift, every capacity, ability, resources, whatever it is I have so that I can benefit others, right? That beautiful phrase that a lot of our Protestant brothers and sisters use, which is, I'm blessed to be a blessing, is the logic he wanted to instill in me. Remember that when you're blessed with lots of gifts, it's not a sign of how much God loves you. You're so special, he gave you these gifts. But it's a sign of how much he loves those that he wants the gifts in you to be showered on. So it doesn't mean God doesn't love me, but it orders properly the gifts and the things that go along with gifts that you have, right? The success you have, the attention you get, whatever it is, the compliments, the praise, the recognition, etc. It's all about others. It's all about God, so it's all about others. God and neighbor are really one thing in God's economy. He died. The last time I went to see him, last time we saw each other, we talked, and it was a deep, difficult, and wonderfully expansive conversation. And he said to me, I want to say one thing to you. No, he didn't know he was going to die, I don't think. When we had a conversation, but it had that kind of character to it when I look back on it. He said, if there's one thing I want you to remember going forward is that you need to be relentlessly faithful to your commitment to prayer every day, to prayer, not just to saying prayers, but to making time every day in your day to just dedicate that time to God alone. And that's defined me since then because of him. And he gave me a structure, a way I should make use of that time, which I've kept to this day. But he said, I get up every morning and I go into the chapel and I pray. And he says, for the last 20 years, it's been like eating dust. In other words, my prayer is completely dry. I don't get sweet feelings or insights or wonderful senses of God's presence. It's just dryness. But you do it. This is what you do. I do it of course, I do it for the Lord, but I do it for the people. Like my time in prayer is for my people. It's today's gospel, on this, today is June the, 14th, 16th, 17th, is the gospel of, if you pray, go to your room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. Don't pray in public. And he said, this is my prayer time every day I do here. You know about it because you come here. The priests who live here with me know about it because they live here. But no one else needs to know about that I do this. I don't go telling people I do a holy hour every morning. I just do it. I don't tell people that I have prayer that doesn't give me any cash value, emotional or otherwise, feedback. I do this because it is my duty as the shepherd of this parish, as the pastor of souls, to pray for my people every day and to be a man of prayer. And if I falter in that, then they falter. So it's what you do. It's not about you. It's not about you. And that was another refrain of his, it's not about you. Yeah. And I'm telling you, and it's not like Catholic low self-esteem. And in him, he knew who he was. He had a very sure sense of himself. He was very at peace in his own skin. He knew his own faults and his weaknesses and failings. He also knew what his duty was in life. He knew what his gifts were. He knew what his strengths were and how they could be used well. But it was never about him. And he used to say to me, lots of things he said to me. There's so many things coming back into my head as I'm thinking about him. You should be known as someone who listens far more than you speak when you speak to others. That the art of listening is the most effective way to mortify the ego, is to listen to people, and especially to listen to people that you find difficult to listen to. One Lent, I asked him for help with penance, and he said, "I'll be happy to. I want you every single day to have lunch with, call, visit, go for a walk with, in some way, reach out to someone that you find difficult to be around, unpleasant to be around, that you don't naturally want to be with. I want you to do that every day. Find a way to do that. And, at the end of Lent, we can talk about what you learned." And so I did. And it was something, boy. There's a lot I learned that Lent, and he helped me unpack it at the end. But he said, it's those kinds of things. It's not the great acts of penance, heroic acts of fasting, although you got to fast. He said it's those little mortifications every day, those little deaths to self that you do every day to put others first, to put their good and their welfare and their needs first. Not in a codependent way, not in a sick, unhealthy way, but in a kind of a self-sacrificing way. Little ones, tiny ones. Mostly little tiny, he said, because if you try to do big ones, you're probably not going to sustain them. They probably will fail and you won't be able to keep them up. But if you do little ones, you can do that. And the advantage of little ones is that they slowly wear away at the ego as you do them. And he would give me all kinds of examples of ways that you could accept little humiliations, that you could look at, the food on the table and you see the one that you like more and that you pass over it without fanfare. You don't mention anything. You don't make a big deal out of it. Whatever it is, just do those. And he said the other advantage is that little tiny mortifications, you can hide them really well, and no one ever needs to know them except God. But the fruits will be immense. So anyway, so he encouraged me to do that and lived it out himself all the time. I can tell you, remarkable. Last thing I'll say, there's so many other stories that are coming to mind, but I'm not going to go through all of them. One time when he taught me how to pray Lectio Divina, which is praying with the scriptures, in a very kind of slow, meditative way. And I have ADD. I wasn't diagnosed then, but I have ADD. It's difficult for me to be slow and meditative and linger. It's like I want to kind of move. So I had to, kind of work over the years to kind of train myself to do that. And I have, more or less. I've been trying, anyway. So I've been trying it for like 6 months, and I came back to him and I'm like, I've tried this. This is hard. This is just not, it's tough to do this every single day. Whatever, what I don't remember, is so long ago. And he said, okay. He said, well, this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I've given you this basic kind of fundamental prayer method. It's not complicated. It's not long, but I want you to be faithful to it. That's the only thing. Just be faithful to this every day. And if you mess up one day, just get back on the bandwagon. Don't make a deal out of it. Just keep going. And I want you to do it for 20 years. And then after 20 years, then come back and we can talk about your struggles. I misunderstand that. Did you mean like 20 months? 20 years? And anyway, so I kept questioning him, and he said, do you understand what I'm saying? He said, if you've not tried this for a long period of time by just pushing through it with an active will, you don't really know what struggle is until you've done it for a long time. Then you can begin to understand what struggle means to be faithful. And then once you do, then you can begin to benefit from learning from it. And anyway, so marvelous. So much more I could say about him. Okay, let me see what time it is. Let me make sure. I'm all alone in this room, so this could go very, very long. All right, I've got a little bit more time. Thank you for listening, by the way. This is a very casual approach, so I appreciate if you've made it this far. This is lots of indulgences and time off purgatory. I want to talk about 3 other priests, but much, much shorter, even though I could speak at length about all of them. One's name is Father Philip Scott. Some of you may know him. Priest of the Diocese of St. Petersburg in Florida. He founded a community I think it's called Jesus Our Healer, I'm pretty sure, down in Lima, Peru. I think it's where they ended up down there. And I think he's back now in the States. Anyway, back in 2000, 2001, I lived and worked down in the Diocese of St. Petersburg. I was in Brandon, Florida, at Nativity. And I met Father Philip Scott at a presbyteral meeting, at a deanery meeting of priests. And well, without going into the details, I had done a presentation and let's just say I got lots of pushback. Let me just say that nicely. I got a lot of pushback on my presentation, and Father Scott stood up, and I didn't even know who he was, essentially defended me, like stood up for what I had said and spoke to his brother priests. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so afterwards we spoke, and then we connected, and we realized this amazing thing that he had also been a directee of Father Anthony Manochio. Isn't that amazing? And boy, did we ever connect on that. My goodness. We both were devotees of him and had so many stories to share back and forth. But Father Philip Scott was a man he's a passionate Peruvian, passionate, great preacher, just a man of just a big heart, generous, is a man of the poor, a priest of the poor, very much dedicated to the poor. He would serve in Ybor City, particularly in Tampa, and, prostitutes and the homeless and so on, and just ministry out to them. And just a man of prayer and charismatic gifts, pretty wild. Anyway, but he was wonderful. He would spend hours with me just talking and walking and talking and walking and giving me, listening to me and giving me advice and listening to me and giving me advice. And it was just we would walk through the streets and he would interact with different people on the streets. Just, it was wonderful watching his example, very much like Father Manochio, now that I think of it. Anyway, there was one time when my wife and I were probably one of the most challenging periods of our marriage went on there for various reasons. It was a tough time. And so I went to him that one time and shared with him, what was going on, and just wanted to seek his counsel, his advice, his support for whatever I needed to work through it. And I'll never forget it. So he gave me all that, and he said, "You know what? Some donor person came, to Mass recently when I was celebrating Mass, and came up to me afterwards and just said, 'Hey, Father, I got something for you,' and put this in my hand." And he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $100 bill, and he gave it to me. And he said, "I want you to take your wife out to a nice restaurant, and I want you to spoil her, and I want you to tell her how much you love her and how she's the most important thing in your whole life." That there's no one more important. And if you get that straight, then everything else will work out. So just remember that. No matter what you go through, you let her know that she is number one. After God, there's no one in this world that is more important than she is. And if you make that clear to her, then you'll be fine. I haven't thought of that in so long. And so I did. But I thought, that's the beauty of celibate priesthood, is these men are freed up to serve and uplift and encourage those of us, for example, who are married. I think of when I was working with Mother Teresa's sisters in D.C., I remember one of the sisters there, Sister Minorma, told me that one time that Mother Teresa described their vow of chastity this way. She said, "We are alone that others might not be," meaning we give up marriage, right? Not alone, they're in community, of course, but we give up marriage, right? We are alone so that others might not be. So that's the fruitfulness of celibacy, chastity. And that was a crucial moment in my life. Excuse me. That was a crucial moment in my life, in my marriage, in my career, that Father Philip Scott stepped in there. And, he's a man of charismatic gifts, but at that moment, all of his charismatic gifts, whatever they are, were in service to what all charismatic gifts are in service to, and they're all in service to rightly ordered love in your own vocation. It's what all the charisms, wonderful, spectacular ones, and the humble ones, all exist to empower us to love with the love with which Christ loved us on the cross, whatever our state in life is, our situation, our relationships, whatever. So, okay. I mentioned Father Michael Champagne, who is a priest in Lafayette, Louisiana, Community of Jesus Crucified. I think he was born in 1963, if I'm right. He's a native of that area, Louisiana. He's got a thick Cajun accent. He's a raging Cajun, man. This guy is wild. He was influenced by a priest named Father Fry, who was, I think, a Marist priest in Lafayette, who was there, who founded a community, lay community there of lay people dedicated particularly to service of the poor, to the proclaiming of the gospel, prayer, very beautiful lay community. And then eventually out of that lay community was born a community of religious brothers and sisters and priests. And he was eventually ordained in the Diocese of Lafayette, but in a way dedicated to that particular new order that was being born of this community. Anyway, there's so many things I got to say about Father Michael. He got his degree in Rome at the Angelicum. He got his doctorate in spiritual theology, sacred theology. Wrote his dissertation on comparing St. Therese of Lisieux and Mother Teresa of Calcutta's spiritualities. He speaks a number of languages. He loves human beings. He loves the priesthood. He loves the Lord. He loves the church. He loves the poor. He's a man who's just so impassioned and wild and creative and generous and loud and quiet. And one time he telling me this crazy situation he went through, a very challenging one. And at the end of it, I'll just say, he said this phrase that's haunted me ever since. He said, anything for the poor, anything. I'll do anything. And there it is, a common thread of these priests, of their own personal commitment to simplicity and poverty, their love for the poor, their willingness to live among the poor, to be connected with them, to see that the center of influence and gravity in the Christian life is the poor, the lowly. If the church keeps, the poor and the powerless, the voiceless at its center, she'll be fine. The church will be fine. But as soon as she displaces them to the margins of the church and puts the powerful and the influential in the center, then she comes apart. And these priests that I've known, all of them have put that ordering in the right way. So Father Michael Champagne, he has had an immense influence on me. So many things I could say about him. After my mom died in 2019, which was a kind of a sudden experience, and it shook me to the core. And after it was over, the rector of Notre Dame Seminary graciously allowed me to go on a little retreat after my mom died, just to take some time off to kind of process it. And I went to the CJC, community to stay there, one of their houses. And Father we just sat there, and he just let me cry and let me talk through all of that with my mom, and gave me a space just to be there, and to feel like I was cared for and prayed for by all the community there. It's a beautiful community, and welcomed me, and then brought me out into the community to do some of their works with the poor, and just a beautiful human being. So many things I could say about him. I won't say any more. Last one is Father Rick Frechette, whom I just met for the first time this last April, 2 months ago. He's a priest. He's a Passionist priest from the Passionist order, from Connecticut originally, born in the 1950s. Can't remember when. He has served around, I think, in Baltimore when he was first ordained as a Passionist priest in parish ministry. And then eventually he was inspired by a particular priest whose name I can't remember, who was a missionary and worked among the poor, I think in Mexico. So he went to Mexico and dedicated a chunk of time there to serving, and then eventually ended up in Haiti in 1987. And to this day, he's still in Haiti. He's never left, 1987 to this day. And as you know, Haiti is a place of dire poverty and suffering and violence and anarchy, all kinds of things there that are just, awful, awful. And he's never left. He has remained there for this many years. It'll be 40 years coming up this next year. And I found him in 2017 in a New York Times article about his ministry of burying the dead, which is a large part of his ministry down there, is claiming bodies of those that no one claims, either because their families are dead or they're too poor or whatever, all kinds of reasons. And he takes those bodies and he gives them a reverent, they wraps them in beautiful cloth and gives them a simple but dignified coffin and burial, and celebrates Mass and incenses the body and does prayers over them, and goes to morgues and collects all the unclaimed bodies and makes sure that they're all buried properly. That's one thing he did. After the 2010 earthquake, he pulled together a massive effort to bury the enormous number of bodies out there to make sure people got dignified burials, as well as addressing the needs of the living. In the 1990s, after being there for 8-9 years or so, he decided that the biggest need was for medical care. And so he just went ahead and went back to the States, and kind of commuting back and forth between Haiti and I think it was New York, got his degree, his DO, his doctor of osteopathy, and became a doctor, and then founded St. Luke's Foundation and St. Damian's Pediatric Hospital for children, and provides medical care of all sorts to children and adults. Has just poured himself out. He's developed educational systems there, housing projects. This man is tireless and selfless and real and gritty, and just an extraordinary man. So he came here. I was able to, by the grace of God and his generosity, I reached out to him and he accepted the invitation to come give a retreat to our priests in our diocese this April. And I think the consensus of the priests was that was an extraordinary experience of what he himself would laugh at, you said, but of a living saint, this man. Oh, there's so much I could say about that man. Father Rick Frechette, Frechette. If you can look up anything on him on YouTube, his little documentaries on him and other little videos he makes and things like that, very simple. He has books he's put out which are very worthwhile reading. His stories are just extraordinary. I'm on his WhatsApp text thread or whatever that would be, that he sends messages out. And I read them regularly, and it's extraordinary. So he came here, and then I got to meet him. So I went down there during the retreat and had lunch with him, with Father Dustin, my friend, Father Dustin Fedna, and I, and spent about 90 minutes with him. And it was I had so many things I could share from that. But again, a man who lived with the poor, who deals with the most inhospitable and chaotic environment imaginable, who negotiates with bandits all the time in these gangs to try to get things that need to happen for the people. It's a daily reality of just brutality, picking dead bodies off the streets regularly, and again, giving burial to them. And he works with missionaries of charity who are there. There's some contemplative Carmelite nuns who are there that he provides milk for and food, bread, chickens, cows to them so they can have cows for making their own milk. He just the other day, he was providing oxygen tanks for one of the hospitals that no longer could get them. It's astounding. So Father Rick Frechette, Father Michael Champagne, Father Anthony Manochio, Father Philip Scott, and I could name so many more priests, bishops, but particularly priests because of the numbers, that I have been just immensely blessed by. My wife and I have been immensely blessed by. My children have been immensely blessed by. There's so many of them. and what gratitude I have for those men, for the dedication and consecration of their lives to that mission and ministry, for the sake of us, the faithful, for the sake of the Lord, of course, above all else, the mission of the church and the life of the world as a whole. I thank them for the sacrifices they make, that they're alone, that others might not be. So grateful. Lucinda Coverston in this diocese, she's started a prayer ministry for priests, which you can join if you want to, just to find out information on that. Just contact my office here in the diocese. But praying for your priests is essential. You must pray for your priests. They rely on that. They pray for you every single day in the Mass and otherwise, and to pray for them, we lift each other up to the kingdom. So thank you so much for listening. This is longer than it should have been. I apologize. It was strangely cathartic for me to do this. I don't usually think of podcasts as cathartic for me, but I'm grateful to be able to talk about these beautiful men that I rarely talk about. I should talk about more, who have shaped me. So if you have priests like that in your life, maybe you write them a thank you note, a text, a phone call, an email, or something, just to express whatever it is that they've given you, whatever gift it is. Just give them a little bit of a reflection back of some of the light that has shone on you through them, confessions or anointings or counsel or Mass, or just their presence in your family and influence on your children, or your attending to your mother at her death, or whatever. Just be grateful and tell God about them most of all. Thank you so much for listening. As always, another edition of Sharing the Faith. Sorry I sound a little tired today. I am. The coffee did help, but I'm grateful you were with me. This is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, the awesome Derek Diamond, who is our producer. I'm so grateful to. And I'm grateful to you for listening. I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks, hopefully with someone else to speak this time, so you don't have to listen to me for a long time. God bless you.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe, or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.